Hey, welcome to our Rainbow Table, a weekly show that we have thanks to a gal. My name is Deb Pearce, and I'll be your host. Before I tell you a little bit about myself, I want to say hi to Larry in Halifax watching, to Roberta in Winnipeg. Welcome. We have got Raina and David, who's cooking for all of us today, apparently, while they watch. So that's generous. We'll have to send out all of our addresses so that David can mail us whatever they're cooking today. So again, my name is Deb Pearce. Today we're going to talk about sex, baby. Hey, Linda, thanks for tuning in. We're going to talk about sex. So speaking of sex, Deb Pearce, they're sort of in the same sentence, not really. Hey, Laurie in Toronto. A little bit about myself. I have been an out, proud member of the queer community for many, many years. And I've done media, radio, television, emceeing. I host different awards shows. We'll talk about that soon with our first guest. And I'm a born advocate for the queer community. I have never allowed any of the phobias out there to touch my life. And although my first years in the workplace and then into probably 20 years into the workplace, I literally lost every single job for being queer. I won't mention the businesses. They started in Peterborough, then they went to Toronto. And I think that built a bit of a thick skin for having absolutely no regard for homophobia and any of the phobias. So a little bit about myself. I'm a very proud mom of an 8.5-year-old named Jack, who may or may not be watching. This topic about sex, he's not quite there yet. He thought that kissing his dog Lucy was sex. So we're going to probably have a conversation soon about that. Hey, Michelle, welcome. Thanks for joining Rainbow Table. So that's a little bit about myself. Enough about me. Let's talk about Rainbow Table. Who are we? What are we doing? A gal reached out to me a little while ago and said, we've got this project. We want to speak to seniors and specific issues that seniors face. Now, seniors, it's a relative term because there's some stores where you can buy like pharmaceutical things where they consider a senior 55, and then the government is sort of 60, 65. So little side note, in the next 2 decades, 1 in 4 Canadians is going to be in a senior demographic. So if you're not in that demographic yet, God willing, you will be. And for those of you already in that demographic, thank you for the hard work you've done to pave the way for something like this to happen on Fridays at 3 o'clock. So thank you for tuning in. I keep saying 3 o'clock because I'm in Ontario, but for those of you in Vancouver, thank you very much for joining. Winnipeg, Saskatoon, I know you were joining in, so there's some time differences. I hope you got the memo that it's Eastern Standard Time. Welcome, Brian. Thank you very much for joining. So I'm just going to go into a second chat room here to see if my producers have anything to say to me. They don't. So we're going to start with our first guest. We have 3 guests today and a special performance piece at the end, okay? So we're going to talk about sex from people that know all about sex. Now, you know about sex because it feels really good, and I get it. Whether you're getting it or not, I get that sex feels really good. There are some things that might need to be talked about sex and get into the nitty gritty. When I put on my Facebook wall and the group's Facebook wall that's what we were talking about, we have a number of anonymous questions that have been written down here. So Sassy Sally has a good question I'm going to pose to our first guest. Are you ready? Okay. If you're watching on Zoom, YouTube, wherever you are, please join our Facebook group. We're just over 600 now. Please join our Facebook group. It's right there. I don't know my left from my right. Okay. Our first guest is synonymous with sex and sexuality. If you don't know this person, you will by the end of this. So Carlyle Jansen has done so many things for the community, is the founder of Good for Her, Toronto's premier sexuality shop and workshop center, the producer of the annual Feminist Porn Awards, of which I have had the honor of hosting several times. Thank you for that. And the gift bags are amazing. So thanks. Those are the gifts that keep on giving. So Carlyle's been teaching workshops and coaching individuals and couples looking to enhance their sexual lives since 1995. Without further ado, just like magic, I'm going to count to 3, and Carlyle's going to appear as our first guest today. 1, 2, 3. Boom! Just like that.
Just like that.
How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. It's so good to see you.
It's nice to see your face too. It's lovely, lovely. Thanks for being part of a Rainbow Table today. Of course, you're one of our few guests today. Of course you are. So thank you very much for joining. I know sex can be kind of, we had one of our group members thought that I was brave for tackling this subject. So, I'm very fluid about it. You're obviously very fluid about sex and sexuality. And for some people, it's still sort of stigmatized, or it's still kind of hush hush. So I want to talk a little bit about that today to our seniors and to people that are going to be in that demographic someday. So I missed a lot of things about what you do. Tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself that I didn't cover.
Yeah, I mean, you got the basics of it. I have a workshop center and a store at Good for Her in Toronto. We're also available online. We now have lots of educational content online, whether it be recorded videos or live workshops online. The store I started as a space for people to learn, to explore, to grow, and for people of all genders, all desires, all ages, all orientations, all ethnicities, all anything that you want, right? And we try and do that.
Excellent.
And my latest venture is that now I'm a sex therapist. So
I saw that. Congratulations. That is great news. That's a bit of work, like in your spare time doing that.
Yeah, anyway, so I went back to school and now I'm adding that to my repertoire.
Good for you. No moss growing underneath your feet. So we do have some topics, of course, today because we sort of specialize in speaking to seniors. But I do know that there's a lot of allies to that particular demographic. So there's going to be an umbrella of speaking of seniors, but I think it's kind of can cover a lot of things. So right now with COVID, I think we have to speak very specifically right now about sex and potential isolation. What are some safe practices that you might recommend?
Masturbation has always been a really, really great, safe way to have sex. And COVID, just means that we can expand on that a little bit more. And then we can bring that in with other people. So if we are separated from a partner or we're dating online, we can do online sexting. We can do online video chats. And there are great toys that enable us to do that. So the Vectors, the We Vibe toys, you can then put this up your butt and your partner can be on their phone and they can control from somewhere else what's going on. Or if
that's amazing.
Something more like this, right? So you can have fun online. Your partner can pleasure you, and they just need to download the app. So that's the fun part of technology.
All right.
And one of the things about being safe also, especially if it's somebody you don't know, make sure there's nothing really identifiable like your face or a tattoo or something about you if you're not sure if they're recording and they're going to upload it, right? You want to make sure that it's not going to end up on the internet somewhere where people are going to know that it's you.
That distinguishing birthmark has always been a curse for me. I get that. Hi, Steve. Hi, Audrey. Thanks for tuning in today. So when I put up online that we were going to talk about sex today, I got a private message. And again, it can be a very, very private thing, right? Unless it's your job. So Sassy Sally wrote in and was wondering, because of isolation, they identified as she, can you use a vibrator too much so that it sort of creates numbness when you actually get back into the world and you're being touched by a human? Can vibrators sort of impede that pleasure?
So that's a really common worry that people have of all ages. And they think like, am I going to be addicted to my vibrator? Am I ever going to have normal sex again?
Right.
So a couple of basic things. One is that we don't get addicted to our toys. And in particular vibration, we can become habituated to them. So most of us probably remember the days of dial-up internet. And remember, it was a little slower. And so sometimes using toys is a little bit like high-speed internet, right? And then imagine if now we went back to dial-up, it takes a little bit longer. And we think like, oh, it's not working. And then we get frustrated, and then the arousal goes down. And when we get frustrated, the arousal totally goes out the window. Right. So we think, oh, it's not working. I've numbed myself out. I've ruined myself. No, it just means that we need to be a little bit patient because our expectations have changed.
Because the dial-up gets you there. It just takes a little longer.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. All right. I also got, there's some great questions here as well. So there's an expression, I don't know if it has to do with sex or not, but they mentioned if you don't use it, do you lose it?
There is some truth to that. There is absolutely some truth. So especially folks who have vaginas, as we get older, we produce less of the hormones that keep that area really nice and well lubricated and happy to have things go in there. And sometimes it becomes a little bit more painful. We don't lubricate as much. So certainly keeping those juices flowing is really helpful to maintaining health. And that means that you can even just use stimulation on the outside, because even if you stimulate your clitoris or your vulva, it still gets all the blood flow into the vagina because that whole area gets blood. So that's great. And certainly our muscles are important to keep in shape, and our pelvic floor that just like holds everything in. It's like a hammock from the pubic bone to the tailbone, and everybody's pelvic floor needs to stay healthy. And so pleasuring yourself, having sex with a partner, you can do your Kegel exercise. We can all do them right now, right? I
just did 12 of them since we started talking about it. I don't know if you can tell when I kind of go like this. I'm doing them. I'm doing it now. Can you tell? Subtle.
So it's as though you were stopping the flow of urine, right? And we often talk about that for people who have vaginas, but anybody needs to keep those going. So exercising those muscles, and of course, sex on your own or with a partner is a great way to exercise those muscles. But, you know, just like while you're hanging out here, you can squeeze for 5 seconds and relax, and, you know, that'll keep those juices flowing and keep you healthy.
If you have a question, because I have a few more, if you're watching now, thank you for tuning into Rainbow Table. We're here with Carlyle Jansen. If you have a question, I will try to fit it in because there are a few more. One is from Anonymous. So how common is it for women to make love in a missionary position with a vibrator between them, and what vibrator do you recommend for that position?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So there are lots of options, but many of you might be familiar with the infamous magic wand.
Magic wand.
I
want to kind of do this. I want to kind of do this.
It's powerful. And here's the other thing is that also as we get older, things get a little bit harder, right? It gets a little bit harder for us to orgasm, and we need a little more power. If you are someone with a vagina, there's kind of like a bigger drop off. If you're someone with a penis, it's a little more gradual. So often we need a little bit more oomph to get us there. There's nothing wrong with that. And lots of people need vibrators in order to pleasure themselves. Just like some of us need glasses to see, some of us need a calculator to do math, and some of us need vibrators to orgasm.
I love your analogies. I love it. From high-speed internet to an analogy about vision. I love it.
So this is good to put between the two of you, or you can even use something shaped like this, right? Either way is good.
All right. Awesome. And from the same Anonymous, how can I recycle, if at all, my imperfect condition silicone dildos? Can you do that after boiling? Is that a thing?
Well, so I'm assuming it means like give it to somebody else. So
I think so.
So boiling it for 3 minutes will pretty much sterilize it. And silicone is non-porous, so it pretty much takes care of that. So I would, see if you have a friend who wants it. I mean, there's always a disclaimer, right? But if you boil it to sterilize it, there's probably somebody who would get great pleasure from it. And if they're worried about it, they can always use a condom with it. And if it hasn't been used in, a few weeks or years, well then, you're pretty much good to go.
I just want to know how I've been to clothing exchanges. I want to see what that kind of get together might be. I'm in, Anonymous, if you want. Listen.
All right.
because we all kind of get tired of certain things, right? Variety is the spice.
Yeah.
Dennis writes in, as I get older, it's not as hard. I'm learning something I don't want to know. Dennis, we're all going to get there, honey. There's no shame in that game. There really isn't.
Well, and one of the keys is really openness and flexibility. So Dr. Peggy Kleinplatz is in Ottawa, and she has studied like what makes optimal sexual experiences. And they did a study on older people, and they found that even if things are different or they change or they're harder, that people who are creative, those of us who reinvent sex, because we want to do different things anyways, right? People who are flexible and open to new kinds of things, and people who don't think like, what worked last time? What works now?
Right.
What did you like last time? Well, that's helpful information, but what do you want now, right? That open-mindedness will enable us to have fabulous sex no matter what we used to like, and what's easy and what's hard now.
And it is really difficult as you age, and I guess regardless of age, as relationships go by, life happens, kids happen sometimes, jobs happen, mental health comes into play, right? So there's that, that mind body, that connection there. So it's a really difficult conversation. I can sit here and talk to you about it, but I've been partnered and been like, rabbit, like I can't always talk about this stuff. It would seem surprising. But when it really comes down to that personal aspect, it is challenging. And that's maybe why you got into being a sex therapist, because you see the positive sides of it, but you also see that can be a tricky conversation, right?
Yeah, it's always hard to bring things up. And, one of the things that I find is particularly hard is folks who have penises when the penis doesn't work the way they want it to. Right? That's a really, really hard conversation. Also, anyone who's having a hard time with orgasm. So I want to show you one toy that's my favorite.
Okay. I'm really getting in here now.
So here's my nice rainbow colored
Happy Pride
penis.
Month. Yes. Yep.
Yes. So this is the hot octopus. So if you have challenges with getting an erection, this is a toy that you can use. And there's a little vibrating part here, and it's just right here, and it vibrates the frenulum, the little part under here. Maybe that's too loud. Anyways, it vibrates there.
I like the audio, but yeah, it is kind of
so you put it like this, and you stimulate the penis. That's always backwards. And so it stimulates that frenulum. And so what I love about it is you can use it whether you have an erection or not. Oh. And because most toys now, there are pumps also that work really well. But I love this because you can feel pleasure whether you have an erection or not. And sometimes there's so much pressure about keeping an erection, getting an erection, that you can still feel lots and lots of pleasure. You can use it with a partner who can put this against their perineum or different areas. And you can still have fun whether you have an erection or not, because our bodies are changing and shifting. And of course, when you get freaked out about not having an erection or not having an orgasm, or your body looks different or whatever, you get stuck and you have a hard time enjoying the pleasure, and then it doesn't happen the way you want it to.
And when you think about pressure, like there is this built-in societal pressure for vaginas to be super tight and for penises to be really big. I was talking with somebody today, and there is a stigma when you go in and you're like, the last condoms I got were too big. What's your smallest condom? So there is that. I don't know where that comes from. It's probably a topic for another day about how penis size is.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Important.
It's everywhere.
I know. Why is that? It's a lot of pressure. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, and there's so much pressure about the way we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to perform, the way we're supposed to orgasm, how we're supposed to make our partners feel. We're supposed to always look good.
Your
all
coming
of those
face
things.
is supposed to be like a slow motion. There should be a fan.
Right.
It shouldn't be like.
If you've got a G-spot, you're supposed to squirt. Like there's, it's everything, right? And everyone's different. And when we compare ourselves, then, in anything, right? Whether it be sex or how funny we are we as funny as Deb is? Are we as smart as someone? We can't live up to all of those ideals.
Well, everyone's got to be good at one thing. And I don't know if it's funny or sex, but I'm really good at one of them. Okay. Okay, so I have some more questions here. I feel like we have to wrap it up soon. I just got a message from a gal saying, check the comments, saying that we missed the point about guys. I think we covered that maybe after that, but the conversation can continue. Carlyle will be getting a practice soon, obviously. You can be in touch. There are workshops. How are you doing that? You're doing the online workshops now during COVID?
Yeah,
the video
them
tuning
online.
in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see Steve. Is it normal for hard penis to stay the same, but flaccid penis to shrink with age and almost turtle? Certainly our hormones play a large piece in how our bodies respond and what they look like. And so with the dip in testosterone over time, definitely penises are going to look and feel different. They're not necessarily going to get as hard. They're not going to respond the same way. But yeah, you can feel free to reach out to me with any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out, or I'll pass you on to someone who does.
It's interesting. Hey, Jessica, I think it's great too. It's interesting. Our bodies age, right? And what I'm coming to find by doing this for Egal and speaking to seniors is that there's so much ageism in the world and the queer community. So if my body changes and things that used to be here are here, of course genitalia is going to change and move and shape and be different. That's part of, there's gravity, there's life, there's hormones. Vaginoplasty, I'm not sure what the word is more popular than rhinoplasty in LA now. So a tightening of the vagina that loosens over time or after childbirth. It's it's interesting.
Yeah, and all these comparisons to porn performers, and fortunately there's lots more porn now that's a little bit more diverse, that's showing people who are older, that's showing people with different kinds of labia, different kinds of penises, so that's great that we have different images that we can use to validate who we are and our experiences are.
Right. And to quote Lady Gaga, we were born this way. Mm-hmm. We're born this way,
and we age
use
this
what
way.
You have. Yeah, we do. We do.
Right?
We do. Yep.
And there's lots of different kinds of beauty, and part of that is finding the beauty in yourself, and also what makes me a good lover, right? That I know myself. Confidence is actually one of the strongest things that people are attracted to, and if I can feel confident in who I am, what I like, communicating with you, talking with you about what I like, asking you what you want, all of those things, that confidence is actually what's sexy, not necessarily how big or small or wrinkled we are.
Right. So it appears to me that I could talk to you forever, but we do have other guests on the show, and I am grateful for the time that you've spent with us today. Thank you for all of your questions. Steve says, men don't want to have these conversations. Well, we just did, Steve, and we're opening up the door for you to continue these conversations with potentially your lover, future lovers, past lovers. David, thank you. Kevin, thank you. Thank you very much. Keep your comments coming. Carlyle, when people want to see you and maybe buy some stuff from your store, go to goodforher.com, check out some workshops, have those uncomfortable conversations, because at the end of the day, it feels really good. And we should, we should all be doing it. God knows I should be doing it more, but we'll get into that later. Carlyle, thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Amazing. Carlyle, just so important to have these conversations and to talk about, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. It can be a really uncomfortable conversation. And when we don't want to talk to our doctor or our friends about what's going on with our bodies, then we kind of think that we're alone. I had some great feedback. Thanks, Michael. And thanks, Kevin. Some great feedback to talk about this stuff. So thank you again. If you're just joining Rainbow Table, it does feel good, David. If you're just joining, welcome. We're talking about sex and health and all that stuff. Carlyle and I tapped into it a little bit, but we started to talk about the conversation of sex. And if it's kind of lacking in your home, how do you have those conversations? So, of course, we had to bring on Dr. Philip Johnson. Your last name Johnson is not lost on me that you're a sex therapist. There's a demographic of people that will know that Johnson is slang for a penis, and part of you that don't, and now you do. So Dr. Johnson received his doctoral degree in clinical psychology from McGill University in Montreal. subsequently completed two, oh, he's a smart one, postdoctoral fellowships at acclaimed institutions in the US. He first trained, you're a big deal. Okay, so you're a clinical psychologist and a sex therapist. So without further ado, let's bring on our next guest here to Rainbow Table, Dr. Philip Johnson. Welcome.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, thanks for being in the waiting room. I saw your face at about 2:45, so thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here.
Not patience at all. I mean, I routinely refer my clients to Good for Her, so it's just such an honor to be in the same space as you and Carlyle. So no, I was really happy. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, so you heard the interview, which is wonderful.
Yes,
we talked about toys and pleasuring and aging and stuff like that. I did tap into this, but I didn't want to get into it too much because I wanted to save it for you as a sex therapist. So for seniors and aging, what are some of the more common things? I don't want people to feel like they're alone. There's no bad question when it comes to sex because we all have a little something going on up here, right? What are some of the more common things that you, in that particular demographic for seniors, that you're hearing?
Yes. Okay. So that's a great question. And I completely agree with you. No such thing as a bad question. If I can't answer it, I'll look up the answer or I'll direct you to someone who can, like Carlyle. So for seniors, some of the, and especially for LGBTQ2IS seniors, some of the issues that I would see, they fall under the domain of specific to LGBTQ2IS. It would be, one, there's often issues of isolation and a lack of connection. And that is often informed by things such as stigma and prejudice. So it's harder to be able to, let's say, move around in the larger society. But it's also really defined in terms of, we have historically defined our relationships as families of choice. They're not the traditional heteronormative families. We have created our own families, and which also means that those families are also very much shaped by history and culture. For example, the HIV/AIDS crisis in the US of the 80s or even Canada. A lot of people lost a lot of their meaningful connections over time, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, these are changes that are historically and culturally and even environmentally imposed upon our support networks. And so for seniors, I find that that's one big change that they're coming across. Also, because of stigma and discrimination, a lot of individuals have lost contact with their families of origin. And so isolation is a big deal, and the lack of connection. Connection is what makes us human, and to not have that, oh yeah, it is a void.
It's really hard when you see somebody. I saw somebody yesterday. I wanted to hug them because I am a hugger innately. But I'm like, the elbow is cute, but it's not. It doesn't. So isolation really exacerbated by COVID, of course, and then maybe being newly single in the new year, and then oops, just kidding, you can't meet anybody like that.
For sure.
Okay,
the other big issue as far as seniors go is also changes in their body over time. So I think Carlyle got a question in terms of the penis changing over time. And those are also typical changes that happen with age. So for example, with male-bodied people, for instance, there's often a thing in the sex therapy world in terms of expect sexual functioning changes. By that, I mean issues with arousal, orgasm, desire. Expect that to change with every passing decade. So the way that you operate at 30 is not the same as you would at 40, 50, 60, 70 and onwards, because the body changes. And so I feel like for a lot of individuals, coming to terms with their changing body is another big one, not just in terms of function, but also in terms of its appearance.
And when you speak to, and I'll just shorten it down to queer community to encompass all the diversity of our wonderful rainbow. So when you do speak to the queer community, there's a very highly sexualized aspect to the queer community. So when you take pride in that, you see banks using very, very hard-bodied, youthful people to promote their brand, right? Because that's sexy, because that's how we are conditioned to view as sexy, right? It's ageist, it's body shaming, it's all the things. And believe me, I know what I suspect that I know what it would take to actually get that body. I don't know because I haven't achieved that, but good for them. But there is something really really stigmatized around your ability and your body and how many times you can, all that stuff. And for that to play mentally. So you speak to people about that, couples, singles, both?
Oh my gosh. Deb, this is a huge subject in terms of body image. And I feel like it's one, and I'm going to use your language as well, it is one that is very specific to queer communities. So The reason for that is you're absolutely right. A lot of advertising focuses on a certain kind of body. And what happens over time, we begin to assume that only a certain kind of body is appropriate for sex and for sexual relationships. Well, that's a problem, because if our body doesn't meet that ideal, then we don't think that we're good enough for sex. And that's a huge issue. And that's some of the work that I do with some of the individuals I come across. And also what happens, even for people who have those bodies change over time. So then you're kind of, entering this process of, I'm mourning the body that I once had and the way that I looked. And am I not good enough as I am at this stage in my life for the kind of pleasure that I want? And my message is, no, no, no. You are always a sexual being. You have a right to sexual pleasure.
That's right. That's right. And if you can't embrace those changes, then you're going to get in your head, right?
Yes.
And then to speak to Carlyle, it really harkens back to, like, if you are exuding that confidence, maybe you got to fake it till you make it. But if you exude that confidence, then your mind, body, genital connection will all potentially connect.
Totally.
So thank you very much, Dr. Philip Johnson. I'm not done with you, not even close. But I do want to say to our viewers here, and thank you very much for joining Rainbow Table today. We welcome your questions, so we are going to address them right now. Hannah says, does sexuality change over time?
Oh my gosh. Well, that is a big question. Okay, so sexuality depending in two different ways. So one, I partly answered the question in terms of bodies and sexual functioning. And the answer to that is yes, yes, yes. It does change. In terms of sexual function, meaning in terms of, for people with penises, getting an erection or being able to get aroused, in terms of orgasm, that does change over time, but it doesn't change to the degree that you can't have fun. Pleasure is the measure. To speak to your point about mind-body connection, what is the biggest sex organ that we have? It's the brain. Yes, gold star for you. Well, yeah.
Gold star, no, absolutely. Double gold star.
Yeah.
I was wondering when I was going to work that into the conversation. Well done.
Totally not intentional, but hey.
So, was it though? Yes.
So yes, so bodies do change over time, as does sexual function. The other way in which sexuality can change over time is, and the literature seems to show this more for people born with vaginas than for people born with penises, is that sexual orientation does change a little bit over time. So the people that we find we're attracted to, they don't necessarily remain constant through life. There is a fluidity in that. And sometimes people can get very confused about the feelings and the fantasies that they have. But in the context of sex, I mean, see if you can have fun with it.
Yeah, you can't read my mind.
Yeah. So
thank God.
But yes.
Dirty. And I know we're talking about bodies that are born with that. I don't want to be remiss in not speaking necessarily to intersex. I haven't got those questions yet, but I do know that I want to be respectful of, if those questions come in, I'd love to talk about that as well. David says, I've gained weight as I've aged. Weight seems to be a huge issue in the gay community. I think we kind of talked about that, David. I hope you were watching. If not, you can watch again. We will be playing this afterwards and for eternity online. So yeah, there is that all harkens back to self-esteem and a lot of body image pressure, right? Body shaming.
And I will say that the research literature does show that in particular, gay men tend to have especially higher pressure to look and feel a certain way. It's almost as similar to the research literature. If we look at the correlations between findings, gay men and heterosexual women, they seem to score pretty high up there in terms of body image.
That makes sense to me. And I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, but I hear what you're saying.
What do those two groups have in common? They are the object of desire by other male-bodied people. So,
wow, that's a takeaway. There it is.
Yep.
That's another aha moment. All right, we have one more question here, or maybe a statement. I'm going to read it as I go along. I hope it's good. Daniel, it's bigger for my aging eyes. There's another total level of change too. We as men and gay men are expected to be horny, interested in sex all the time. As testosterone levels decrease with age, that decreases, and there's a grieving element for that loss, but also stress from not living up to that expectation.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think there is a lot of pressure, particularly on gay men, to be as horny and sexual as possible. And the truth of the matter is that, yes, it's true, and that we also see higher rates of STIs in gay older men than we would see in heterosexual older men. So there is certainly some pressure there. I agree with Daniel. I do think that there is a place for grieving, and we do need to acknowledge that. I also think that one of the things that's missing, not just in the research literature, but in the public at large, is messages about sexual health literacy that are specifically tailored to seniors. We have to find a way to educate people that just because your bodies are changing doesn't mean that it has to impact sexual pleasure in the way that it does. It does call for a level of creativity, but for that to happen, we have to actually spend the time understanding what that creativity involves.
Right. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about LBD, lesbian bed death. But I also do think that we kind of covered, because that's, there's that expression, I think, for a reason. But I think we sort of covered that in being really creative and having conversations. And if you're sitting here and you've been coupled for a while, or you're in that situation, or you have some things going on in your mind that your partner doesn't know you're thinking about, Dr. Philip Johnson, you are the perfect person to talk to. You are a love. And I suspect, are you doing in-person therapy now? Or are you doing video, or you are back to that?
They're all Zoom or telehealth or even.
Okay. Call me, maybe. Steve, I got to squeeze one more in. What would you recommend testosterone treatments? Last question for you, Dr. Johnson. Would you recommend testosterone treatments? I guess this is for cis male. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess it could also be for trans bodies too. So I will say, as a psychologist, I'm not a medical doctor, so this is speaking out of the area of expertise. But I would say your first step should be to go and see your family physician, get them to assess testosterone levels, and to do a full health checkup, and then have them make recommendations, including a referral to an endocrinologist for those next steps.
It's a big word. Okay. Well, I thank you very much for joining today. We're going to throw your information up here. And if you're sitting here, there would be nothing more than I don't want to say excite me, because I saw some toys a little bit earlier that I'm kind of interested in. We've come a long way.
They're so good. They're so good. I didn't even know some of those existed. Like the app, I love it. No, I think it's
all of a sudden I could be in the middle of talking to you, and then I mean, that's great.
I know.
That's amazing.
Is it only because there's a toy involved? So.
Oh my gosh, I might just set a timer for myself. I'm ISO lonely right now. So anyway, so I digress. But thank you very much for joining today. If you want to reach out, do we put your contact information here? There it is. Great. Yeah. Great. Yep. So on our EGAL website, on the Facebook group, if you haven't joined, please join. We were at about 609 the last I looked. I'd love to get over 700 by the end of the day. Anything to leave people with today at the Rainbow Table, Dr. Johnson?
Yes. Well, for one, let me just say, Deb, so lovely meeting you. And thanks to EGAL for setting this up. It is such a pleasure and privilege to be here to talk about such an important topic.
Thank you.
In terms of a message that I would have for the audience, if I had to leave it almost with one word, it's empowerment. So just to feel that just because your bodies have changed, just because sexual functions may have changed a little bit, does not mean that you can't enjoy pleasure. Pleasure is the measure. And also think about it. Our sexuality historically has been defined by institutions that have regulated our sexuality and erotic lives. And as Gary Kinsman talks about, these institutions have only been for a short period of time, a part of history. We are also part of that history, which means not only do we have the power to change those institutions, we also have the power to change our erotic lives. So empowerment, empowerment, empowerment.
I love it. I love this topic. I kind of want to, I know we're tackling different issues and topics for seniors. I kind of want to talk about this all day long.
I love it too. Yes. Mm-hmm.
This is great. Thank you again on behalf of all the viewers. I know they've really enjoyed this. So thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. And you stay safe out there. And I hope to see you in person and give you a big snuggle.
Oh, same here. So lovely.
All right. Thank you. Oh, that's great. That's our second guest, or the second course of the Rainbow Table, if you will. Thanks very much to Dr. Philip Johnson. Please keep your questions coming. We love seeing these up, and they're going to be vetted by the team. But if I see it up there and it doesn't come right underneath there, I will mention the question for you if there's something that you want to say. Again, my name is Deb Pearce. Thank you if you're just joining Rainbow Table. I'm going to be your host every Friday at 3 p.m. right here. And our next guest, I haven't met them yet, so I'll give a little backstory. Venus Envy is an award-winning education-based sex shop and bookstores for adults. And it was first established in 1998 as a retail store in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We have another Hala famous person on in after this guest. There's a second location that I've been to in Ottawa in the Byron Market. And we're going to speak with Rachele Manett, is a queer, Jewish, disabled femme with a passion for sex and pleasure-based sexuality education. She works at Venus Envy, and we are going to bring her on by the power of the internet and a team working behind me, right behind me. Let's bring on Rachele as our last guest today.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
You too. This is cool.
Right? You've also been sitting backstage for a good hour, so so we've covered a lot of things today.
Yeah.
And whatever I didn't mention in the introduction, Rachele, please share with all of us some more tidbits, some juicy tidbits about you.
Yes. So oh my God, where to start? I forget what I wrote in my little bio thing.
Well, I've got it right here on my chair, but
Yeah,
you know you better than you.
I
so.
do. It's true. Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that I am queer. I am part of, this community in some capacity. And that has been a huge driving force for why I do the work that I do. Because we queer and trans folk have generally been left out of conversations about sex, which is so stupid. Can I say stupid on here? I forgot to ask.
You just did, and you can, and it's fine. You're in a very safe space.
Okay.
Everybody that's watching has been vetted. You're in a safe space. You couldn't be more cocooned with love, to be honest.
Great. Yeah.
You're in your own village. So
so
when you talk about the work that you do, what is a typical day for you? What gets you up in the morning?
Yeah. Typical days don't exist anymore, do they? I mean, I don't know.
That's a good point.
Right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, my typical day has changed over the last couple of years. I just finished a master's degree, very, very recently finished. I am an official graduate as of this month. Thank you so much.
Sorry about your graduation probably being weird and all that stuff.
It just didn't really happen. But they've told us when actual graduations start again. Some of us are allowed to graduate, especially who are in the grad programs, I guess. So that was kind of a sad thing. Because I had worked on my master's degree took longer than most master's degrees, just because of the things that brought me to do my degree also really came up a lot as personal things that happened. So yeah, my degree took a long time, and I was yes, I finally get to graduate, and then all of this happened, and you know how it goes. But I mean, I could be
big
in
congratulations to you. It sounds like the payoff has been a long time in the works.
Yeah.
So when I read that you were a queer, Jewish, disabled femme, so when you talk about sexuality and education, do you incorporate disability into that? Because I know with aging or disability, and maybe they're certainly not synonymous, but they can be differently abled. What can you share with the group a little bit about that? Because I don't think we can count out anybody who might be disabled and sex and sexuality.
Yeah. Every piece of sex education that I do is in some way, I always have something related to disability in there and accessibility in general. And I think that, often when we hear the term accessibility, we're specifically thinking physical accessibility for people with disabilities, but it means so much more than that. Accessibility is really a fancy word for people getting what they need without having to necessarily ask for it. Which, I think for folks, and especially in the queer community, who have been kind of ignored in a lot of sexual health spaces, accessibility is really important for us too, outside of disability. But yeah, my master's research did look specifically at disabled sexuality and rehabilitation. And I should also say, sort of around the language that I'm using. So for me, as someone who is disabled, using the term disabled is really important for me. But I know for a lot of folks, especially around healthcare providers and things like that, there's a push to use person first language. So to say a person with a disability. And there's a variety of reasons why that might be good or bad or preferred or whatever. But for myself specifically, I've chosen to use that language. And I just wanted to put that out there because it's usually—
I appreciate that because in the time of hard topics and sitting down and listening and learning, it's really important as we speak to this relevance, what's important. So I think I said differently abled. I don't know if that was PC at one point. So I will say disability from here on out moving forward. So I'm going to peel back the onion a little bit about accessibility. So what does that look like, and what can business owners and people in the world generally, what are those things that we might not necessarily, as somebody that has full mobility, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the way that we talk about sex, but I mean, I guess scaling back a little bit, it is tough to find actual accessible spaces, whether that's like physically accessible or seeing yourself represented in those spaces. Usually people without the knowledge, it kind of gets forgotten about. I find that there is this real invisibility when it comes to disability. And I think also to like aging populations. I'm I guess young myself, but I have like a very kind of complicated and special connection, I think, to kind of the aging population as a whole, because my body has changed in such a fast and intense way in the last like 5 years. And I was not expecting that. But yeah, so I've really started to notice like the physical things that are stopping me from going to the places that I need to go. And sometimes it's so far beyond our control as, I mean, sexuality educators and professionals in that kind of realm. And even business owners, it costs so much money to create an accessible, or not to create, but to change a building from being inaccessible to accessible. Right. And, you know, without grants and things like that, I think a lot of smaller businesses are not necessarily able to do that. So it's sort of about finding a way to then better access the community. Something that I think has been one of the very few good things about kind of the space we're in right now is that a lot of us are doing things from home, from a space that probably is more accessible to us. And I've been able to sort of explore what webinars look like and get to do a lot of education online, which has been super popular and like really well received. And has been really nice for me to get to just sit in my own house, in my own chair with my fancy pillow. That makes sitting so much easier.
Right.
Yeah. But it also makes it easier for people to tune in and say, you know, whether it's for stigma-related reasons around being kind of afraid to talk about sexuality, or being, I mean, afraid, nervous, whatever, feeling that there's a reason they shouldn't be talking about sexuality, they can now sign in like a more like people can't see them. People don't know what they're doing, an anonymous way, right. And still learn and still hear these really important things, but they don't have to get to the place. They don't have to be seen necessarily. And I think those are some good baby steps to consider.
There's so many things to consider when we talk about this topic and this subject. And it sounds like you're so well versed and passionate, and I suspect that there is some rights and justice work that you do. Are you working towards that? Is that what your paper was about?
Kind of. I mean, I feel like every time I talk about it, it's like a little bit of justice work, you know. I've done a lot of justice work sort of throughout like my undergrad and throughout my graduate degree, mostly focused on like queer and trans justice, and then kind of with my master's degree where it was so focused on disability, and then kind of newly experiencing that myself. That also got to be a bit louder, which I was very happy to do. But yeah, every time I do a talk, I feel like every time I talk about disability, it's like, that's justice work. Actually, like, yeah. So
the voice. And we've got, I don't know how many people are logged in right now. I'm curious as to how many people are hearing us live. It kind of freaks me out when I sit here in my own living room alone. Like, you're not alone right now at all. So we do have an anonymous question. Any tips for someone with an invisible illness or disability and sex? And how can I spice it up?
Yeah, I mean, it really...
Can you give me an example of an invisible disability first, so that we're all on the same page?
For sure.
Not to put words in Anonymous's mouth, but maybe something we haven't considered, or...
Yeah, and so sometimes, I guess what I'll talk about is something that I hear pretty regularly and something I experience myself. So chronic pain is something that I think a lot of people have, and it might not be the disability, but often it accompanies disability. And there's so much, you know, connection between the two that I would sort of say that like having chronic pain might be an invisible disability. It's very hard to tell, you know, if you see somebody using a mobility aid or like a mobility device of some sort, you're kind of like, oh, I think I know what that person is or is experiencing. Although, I mean, and we can explore that and whatever, like, but, you know, we have a tendency to see something and be like, I understand now. And with that, you know, for someone who uses an obvious mobility aid, there is a lot of, like, there's more stereotyping that goes on. There's more kind of complication around identity politics and all that. But with an invisible disability, something that I've noticed is, you know, we can hide in plain sight, which means that all the privilege that I hold sort of often outweighs this thing that is inherently a part of me. And especially for something like chronic pain. There are probably so many people logged on here, or so many people in this world that experience chronic pain. I can't think of the stats right now. I was supposed to remember them and tell you some stats, and I did not remember.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. But you know,
like, say thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah,
chronic
for
pain.
sure.
It is, because it is that invisible thing. You don't know with fibromyalgia, chronic pain, any of those things that are going on, because you know, if you can't see it, it's like the coronavirus. People can't see it, so does it exist? You know, there is that thing. So before we close off this interview, and I thank you for joining us today at Rainbow Table, what is one thing that the viewers can take away? It can be something that you all think we have, you know, we might have an assumptions campaign going on in our brain, or what's something that you want us to kind of think about moving forward? Because I want to learn more.
For sure. I mean, I think that this sort of, like, trying to stick with the theme a little bit, and some things that were really exciting that Carlyle and that Dr. Johnson was talking about was, you know, kind of the, like, finding the beauty in yourself and coming to terms with kind of where you're at. And some of that comes from grieving a body you once had, which is something that we don't talk about often enough, and something that I'm still doing all the time. There's like these elements of grief. But as our bodies are changing, and while a lot of us are probably, you know, from the queer community or trans communities, we're already kind of in a position to say screw it to what society has expected of us. We're already there, right? Like, we've been doing it forever because we're kind of very well ignored, unfortunately. But, you know, it gives us this it really sets us up in a good way to say, well, like, here are all these ideas of, like, bodies and what they're supposed to look like and what sexy is supposed to mean. Let's just throw that right out the window and start to explore ourselves in, like, a deeper way, because we're already halfway there, right? I just think that there's so much about kind of taking it into your own hands. The system is not set up for us. And as much as it sucks that we have to do all that work ourselves, if we have to do it, let's do it.
I feel like all of us should. I mean, there's a lot of us watching right now. I feel like we should all, you know, there's the mirror out that you're supposed to get out to just look at yourself. I feel like we should all be doing this naked.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Masturbate with the mirror. Yes.
Yes. I mean, what? Rachele, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any further questions, I know you can reach out to venusenvy.ca, and you can probably tailor your questions to contact the store for Rachele. If you want to talk about disabilities, if you want to talk about sex, if you want to talk about disability and justice, you are the person to talk about. Thank you very much for joining Rainbow
Table. Thank you so much,
today. All right, my pleasure. Cool. Awesome. What a great day. I never want to end. Okay. So Rachele was our third course, and now we've talked about it. You're kind of seeing that you can be in touch with us at any given time by mentioning it in the comments. Please get in touch with us. We've got most of our, if not all of our shows mapped out for the future, but we really want to hear from you and what's really important to you. If you are in the senior demographic that we're speaking to, please let us know if we're missing something. Please let us know if there's something we missed. It brings me to the letting you know that we want to hear from you, right? So our Facebook page is something, if you haven't joined already, please let us know what you can bring to the table. We're talking about isolation right now, so let us know about movie nights. Let us, frankly, given the topic today, let us know about some Zoom member IDs and passwords for Zoom sex parties. I'm just saying, I'm open. Okay, I'm not going to talk about me as much about sex, but we want to know what you can bring to the table, because we learn from you and we learn from each other, so thank you. All right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce somebody that we caught up with a little bit earlier today. We did a pre-tape video. It's another Haligonian, originating from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Glace Bay, where my mom Elizabeth Therese O'Leary is from, right? And the infamous Anne Murray from that area. Was formerly in the Navy, is Halifamous, and featured in Canada's a Drag, a weekly docuseries from CBC Arts that showcases drag artists from across the country. This is something that we received from Elle Noir. Without further ado, enjoy.
Thank you so much, Deb. That was so interesting to learn. Hello, everyone watching Rainbow Table Episode 2, where we're talking about sexual health. I'm so happy to be joining you today. My name is Chris Cochran, but for the last 15 years, people know me as my drag persona, Elle Noir. I'm a Black transgender woman, originally from Cape Breton, and now living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm an entertainer, a makeup artist, and an esthetician. I also teach transgender inclusion in the workplace, and I am very interested in my sexual health as a transgender woman, but also as a post-op transgender woman as of 2019. I do believe that every trans person has the right to choice. Your body, your choice. Surgery does not make the person. Anyways, I want to say thank you so much, EGAL Canada, for having me here. And now, please enjoy my performance of Good as Hell by Lizzo. Lots of love, Rainbow Table. Mwah.
I do my hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Woo, child, tired of the bullshit. Gone, dust your shoulders off. Keep it moving, yes, Lord. Trying to get some new shit in there. Swimwear, going to the pool shit. Come now, come dry your eyes. You know you a star, you can touch the sky. I know that it's hard, but you have to try. If you need advice, let me simplify. If he don't love you anymore, just walk your fine ass out the door. I do my hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Baby, how you feeling? Woo, girl, need to kick off your shoes. Gotta take a deep breath, time to focus on you. All the big fights, long nights that you've been through. I got a bottle of tequila I've been saving for you. Boss up and change your life. You can have it all, no sacrifice. I know we did you wrong, we can make it right. So go and let it all hang out tonight. Cause we don't love you anymore. So walk your fine ass out the door. And do your hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? And we gon' be alright. Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Yeah. Listen, if he don't love you anymore, then walk your fine ass out the door. And do your hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? And we gon' make you hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Baby, how you feeling?
Yay! Elle Noir, thank you very, very much for joining Rainbow Table today. And thank you for joining. I know I mentioned some of your names. I love the instant feedback. I love the instant gratification. I love the questions. Keep them coming. Keep the conversation going on our Facebook page. Again, my name is Deb Pearce. I am your Rainbow Table host, and it has been an honor and a pleasure to be part of today's show, talking about sex and sexual health and disability and justice. Before I say my final words, I want to say that the reason that I'm wearing this today, and then on the back I have 49 dubs on the back. Today that we're filming, if you're watching this after, it's later, but June 12th, 2016 is the date of the Pulse nightclub massacre. So I just wanted to say that we here at in my home and with the gal, we're thinking about our queer family even just a little bit more so today, 4 years in. So thank you very much for joining us today. Sex and sexuality is fun. You couples out there that haven't been talking about that in the bedroom, talk about it. One life, you guys. It feels really good, the sex. My last parting words to you are thank you for joining. There's always a seat for you at the rainbow table. See you next week.